Looking back, we should have known something was off when the aliens interrupted the Westminster Dog Show. I mean, of all the important broadcasts they could have chosen for first contact, the UN General Assembly, the World Cup final, or even one of those weird 3 a.m. infomercials, they picked the moment champion Royal Woofington III was about to claim Best in Show. The timing couldn't have been worse. The magnificent golden retriever had just completed his final lap around the ring, his flowing coat catching the spotlight like some kind of canine supermodel. That's when every screen on Earth switched to what looked like a purple jellyfish, wearing a business suit. I was watching it all unfold from the break room of Second Chance Paws, my modestly successful, read, barely staying afloat, dog shelter in suburban Denver. Coffee mug halfway to my mouth, I watched as the alien cleared what I assumed was its throat, though honestly it could have been burping or singing opera for all I knew about alien anatomy. "Greetings, citizens of Earth," it announced in perfect English. "I am Ambassador Zort of the Graxixi Confederation. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations with your species." One of our resident mutts, a scruffy terrier mix named Professor Barks-a-Lot, tilted his head at the screen and let out a confused whimper. I couldn't blame him. The ambassador's head tentacles were doing this hypnotic wave that made me slightly seasick. "We have been monitoring your civilization for some time," Zort continued, "and believe you are ready for integration into the galactic community. We bring gifts of advanced technology, medical knowledge, and cultural exchange." "Well, Prof," I said to the dog, who had now pressed himself against my leg, "either this is the most elaborate marketing campaign for a new sci-fi streaming series, or we're about to have some very interesting new neighbors. The next few weeks were a blur of global celebrations, diplomatic meetings, and what felt like every news outlet on Earth trying to interview the same 3 aliens. The Graxixi, it turned out, were essentially space bureaucrats. Imagine if you combined a DMV employee with a United Nations diplomat and gave them color-changing skin. They were efficient, polite, and about as exciting as a tax form. But they did bring some pretty impressive gifts. Within days, they'd shared plans for clean energy technology that made solar panels look like potato-powered calculators. Their medical knowledge helped cure 3 types of cancer in the first week alone, and their cultural exchange program was in full swing, with humans learning about galactic art and literature, while the aliens became oddly fascinated with our reality TV shows. I spent most of this time doing what I always did, running the shelter, walking dogs, and trying to convince people that adopting a slightly cross-eyed pit bull named Princess Droolenstein was definitely a better life choice than buying some designer breed. But I kept an eye on the news, especially when the Graxixi started establishing their embassy complexes in major cities. Dr. Linda Martinez, a xenobiologist who became something of a celebrity for being one of the first human scientists to work directly with the aliens, appeared regularly on news programs to explain Graxixi biology and culture. She had this way of making even the most complex alien concepts sound like she was explaining them to a particularly dense golden retriever, which, considering the average attention span of news show hosts, was probably appropriate. "The Graxixi are a highly organized species," she explained during one broadcast. "They value efficiency and order above all else. Their entire society is structured around the concept of optimizing systems for the greater good. That should have been our first warning sign. Anyone who's ever owned a dog knows that efficiency and order go right out the window. The moment your furry friend decides that 3 a.m. is the perfect time for an emergency squirrel alert." But we were all too caught up in the excitement of not being alone in the universe. Humans and aliens were getting along like old friends at a barbecue, though the Graxixi politely declined our actual barbecue invitations, being strict vegetarians who looked mildly horrified at the concept of grilled meat. It wasn't until about a month after first contact that I noticed something odd. The Graxi delegates who visited our city would take these long detours to avoid walking past dog parks. When forced to interact with dogs, they'd maintain what seemed like an unnecessarily large distance. At first, I assumed it was just alien germophobia or something similar. Then came the day Ambassador Zort visited Denver for the opening of their local embassy. I was walking a group of shelter dogs past the construction site, taking the scenic route because Princess Drulenstein was going through a phase where she insisted on greeting every fire hydrant like a long-lost relative when the ambassador's entourage passed by. The moment our dogs came into view, every single Graxi in the group turned a sickly shade of green, their head tentacles writhing in what I would later learn was their species' expression of extreme distaste. Ambassador Zort recovered quickly, but not before I caught the look of pure revulsion that crossed their features. That's when it hit me. These aliens had a problem with dogs, and not just a "I'm more of a cat person" kind of problem. I wish I'd known then what I know now. I would have started stockpiling tennis balls and squeaky toys for the resistance. Because as it turned out, first contact wasn't just about making friends among the stars. It was about to become the biggest dogfight in human history. And I, Max Cooper, proud owner of Second Chance Paws and professional pooper scooper, was about to find myself right in the middle of it. The thing about world-changing revelations is that they rarely happen during convenient business hours. This particular bombshell dropped at exactly 2:47 a.m., right as I was trying to convince a newly rescued St. Bernard that my couch was not, in fact, a giant chew toy. Breaking news, my phone blared. Graxixi delegation proposes controversial Earth enhancement initiative. I clicked the link and there was Ambassador Zort, their head tentacles doing that weird Ripley thing they did when they were about to say something they thought was particularly clever. After careful study of Earth's ecosystems and social structures, the ambassador announced, we have identified a significant obstacle to human advancement. The species known as Canis lupus familiaris, what you call dogs, represents a remarkable drain on human resources and productivity. I dropped my phone. The St. Bernard, whom I'd named Beethoven, look, sometimes the obvious name is the right name, looked up at me with those big, soulful eyes that could melt frozen butter at 20 paces. Furthermore, Zort continued, our analysis shows that humans have been systematically compromised by an evolutionary hack perpetrated by this species. Their infant-like features, manufactured dependence, and chemical bonding mechanisms have created what we term a parasitic emotional relationship with humanity. Oh, you did not just call my dogs parasites, I muttered, watching as Beethoven accidentally knocked over a lamp with his tail, and then looked thoroughly confused about why the light went out. The ambassador's next words made my blood run cold. As part of our technological exchange program, we are prepared to offer humanity a comprehensive solution for the humane removal of all canines from Earth's ecosystem. That's when my phone exploded with messages. Well, not literally exploded, though given what was about to happen, I wouldn't have been surprised if it had. The first was from Dr. Linda Martinez. Emergency meeting, my lab, bring coffee, and dogs. The second was from a number I didn't recognize. Second Chance Paws, this is Jim Thompson, military consultant retired, we need to talk. Your dogs might be in danger. The third was from my mother. Max dear, if the aliens take Precious, I'm declaring war on the entire galaxy. Also, are you eating enough? I grabbed my keys, my emergency dog treat bag, don't judge, you try running a shelter without one, and headed for Dr. Martinez's lab at the university. Beethoven came along because, well, have you ever tried telling a St. Bernard they can't come with you? It's like trying to argue with a furry mountain that can give you guilt trips. The lab was already packed when I arrived. Dr. Martinez had transformed her usually pristine research space into what looked like a war room, designed by a committee of dog lovers. Maps covered the walls, computer screens displayed data I couldn't understand, and in the corner, a German shepherd was thoroughly investigating a very expensive-looking piece of alien technology. Down, Tesla, Dr. Martinez called out. Yes, she'd named her dog after the inventor, because apparently that's what scientists do. The crowd was an odd mix, academic types in rumpled lab coats, several clearly military personnel trying to look civilian and failing miserably, and what appeared to be every major dog trainer in the Denver metro area. In the center of it all stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with a square jaw and the kind of posture that screamed career military, even if he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt covered in paw prints. "Jim Thompson," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Though most people just call me Bulldog. Let me guess, because you're tenacious and never let go of a problem?" "Nah, because I look like one. Now, we've got about 48 hours before the HFY present their full proposal to the UN. Dr. Martinez has some information you all need to hear." Linda stepped forward, her usual composed demeanor cracking slightly. "I've been analyzing the HFY's biological data and their social interaction patterns. They're not just suggesting this because they think dogs are inefficient. They're terrified of them." She pulled up a series of charts that might as well have been abstract art for all I could understand them. "Their sensory system is particularly vulnerable to certain frequencies, specifically the exact frequency of a dog's bark. It's literally painful for them, but more than that, they cannot comprehend the human-canine bond. In their society, interspecies emotional attachment is seen as a sign of serious mental illness." "So they're not just bureaucrats," I said slowly, watching as Beethoven attempted to make friends with Tesla. "They're bureaucrats with a phobia of dogs and a pathological need to file everything under rational and efficient." "Exactly," Linda confirmed. "And they're about to try to help us by taking away what they see as a species-wide delusion." That's when Bulldog Thompson cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at the potential forced removal of approximately 900 million dogs worldwide. The HFY have the technology to do it, and they think they're doing us a favor. We need to organize, and we need to do it now." I looked around the room at the unlikely collection of scientists, soldiers, and dog lovers. At Tesla, the German Shepherd, now teaching Beethoven how to properly dismantle an office chair. At the determination on every face. "Well," I said, "I guess we're starting a resistance movement. Anyone know if the aliens are allergic to tennis balls?" Little did I know Operation Puppy Protection was about to make the Underground Railroad look like a casual neighborhood walking group. And somewhere in orbit, Ambassador Zort was about to learn why you never, ever mess with humanity's best friends. You haven't truly lived until you've helped smuggle a dozen corgis past an alien checkpoint in a modified ice cream truck. 2 weeks after the HFY announced their Earth Enhancement Initiative, the resistance movement was in full swing. Second Chance Paws had become the Denver hub of what we dubbed Operation Puppy Protection, though if you asked any of the aliens, we were just a local frozen dairy distribution network. Bulldog Thompson had transformed my shelter's basement into a command center that looked like someone had crossbred a military bunker with a PetSmart. Strategic maps shared wall space with "hang in there" cat posters. Hey, we weren't speciesist. And our security system consisted of both state-of-the-art surveillance equipment and an early warning system of particularly yappy chihuahuas. "The HFY are expanding checkpoints to all major highways," Bulldog announced during our morning briefing. He was standing in front of our tactical display board, which was covered in dog treat crumbs thanks to Professor Barkselot's enthusiastic contribution to yesterday's strategy session. "They're using bioscanners to detect canine presence, but thanks to Dr. Martinez, we've got a countermeasure." Linda held up what looked like a dog collar made from disco ball material. "The scanner's wavelength can't penetrate this shielding. Plus, it's fashionable." Tesla, her German Shepherd, was wearing a prototype and looking unreasonably proud of his new bling. Our network had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. Every dog walker in the city had become an intelligence operative. Pet groomers ran safe houses. The local dog training academy had repurposed its agility course into an escape route training facility. Even the cat people were helping, though they were incredibly smug about the whole "our pets aren't being targeted by aliens" thing. "Delivery from the Paw Patrol," announced Miguel, one of our regular runners, entering with what appeared to be a pizza box. Inside was a stack of falsified pet licenses and transit papers, courtesy of our contacts in the DMV. Turns out a lot of government employees were dog owners and they weren't happy about the alien agenda. "How's the Eastern Corridor?" I asked, scratching behind the ears of our newest rescue, a three-legged border collie we'd named Hopalong Cassidy. "Tight," Miguel reported, "but Mrs. Chen's Chinese restaurant is still running their special delivery service. You order the General Tso's chicken with extra fortune cookies, and they smuggle your dog out in their catering van. The aliens won't go near it since they found out it serves meat dishes." That's when our early warning system activated, meaning all 6 chihuahuas in the front office started yapping at once. Bulldog checked the security feed. "Graxexi inspection team," he announced. "Places everyone. And someone get Princess Drulenstein out of the ball pit." We'd rehearsed this dozens of times. Within 30 seconds, every dog in the visible part of the shelter had been moved to our hidden kennels behind a false wall. The basement command center vanished behind a holographic projection of storage shelves, thank you sympathetic alien tech dealers, and I took my position behind the front desk, trying to look like someone whose biggest concern was getting pee stains out of the welcome mat. The Graxexi inspector who walked in was trying very hard to look intimidating, despite being the color of a seasick lime, and having tentacles that kept twitching at every small noise. "Routine inspection," they announced, waving some sort of scanner. "We've had reports of illegal canine harboring in this district." "Oh my," I said, channeling my best helpful citizen voice. "That's terrible. Though I'm not sure what you expect to find here. We converted to a cat shelter months ago. Would you like to see our latest adoption statistics?" The inspector's tentacles did that weird ripple thing. "Your facility is listed as Second Chance Paws, rather canine-centric nomenclature, wouldn't you say?" "Well, we were going to change it to Second Chance Claws, but the focus group said it sounded like a discount lobster restaurant." Behind the false wall, I heard a muffled bark that we managed to cover with a strategically timed cough from Bulldog. The inspector's scanner swept the room, and I silently thanked Linda's disco collar technology. "And these?" The inspector pointed to some dog beds we'd missed in our cleanup. "Cat beds," I said smoothly. "You know how cats are. They'll sleep anywhere that previously belonged to their mortal enemies. It's a dominance thing." The inspector looked suspicious, but couldn't find any evidence of dogs. As they turned to leave, their scanner started beeping near the front desk. My heart stopped. Had they developed new technology? Were we about to be discovered? Then Professor Barksalot, hidden in his special compartment under the desk, let out a tiny sneeze. The inspector froze. "What was that?" "Oh, that," I smiled brightly. "That's just our resident albino guinea pig. Very rare breed. Makes weird noises because of allergies. Would you like to see their medical records? I have 17 forms documenting their lineage and proof they're not secretly a dog in a very small costume." I kept talking, a technique I'd perfected that usually made the Graxexi so uncomfortable they'd rather leave than endure more human conversation. It worked. Within minutes, the inspector was backing toward the door, tentacles practically tied in knots. After they left, everyone exhaled. Bulldog emerged from behind a potted plant, don't ask, and Linda poked her head out of a supply closet where she'd been hiding with 3 golden retrievers and a very confused pug. "That," said Bulldog, "was too close. We need to step up our game." He was right. The Graxexi were getting better at detecting our operations. We needed something bigger than just smuggling dogs out of the cities. We needed to change the narrative. That's when my phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected source. A Graxexi named Captain Pax, claiming to be part of an underground alien movement that thought their species' anti-dog stance was culturally myopic and potentially damaging to interspecies relations. In other words, we had a dog-loving alien ally. Things were about to get interesting. Here's a pro tip. If you ever need to smuggle a rebellious alien into a secret dog sanctuary, don't do it during puppy training class. Captain Pax learned this the hard way when they materialized right in the middle of socialization 101 inches and immediately got swarmed by 12 enthusiastic lab puppies. To their credit, they handled it better than any Graxi I'd ever seen. Instead of turning that distinctive shade of nauseous green, they merely went slightly mint-colored, and allowed the puppies to investigate their tentacles. "Fascinating," they said, as one particularly bold puppy attempted to give them a kiss. "Their emotional feedback is overwhelming, yet not entirely unpleasant." "That's what we've been trying to tell your people," Linda said, watching as Tesla supervised the puppy invasion with his usual scientific curiosity. "Dogs aren't a parasite or a drain on society. They're partners in humanity's emotional and social development. My research supports this," Pax agreed, gently disentangling a puppy from their formal robe. "But the Council of Efficiency is resistant to data that doesn't fit their established paradigm." "Bureaucrats," Bulldog grumbled, "same across the galaxy." We'd gathered in what we called the war room, though it looked more like a pet supply store had exploded inside a military bunker. The walls were covered with maps showing safe houses and escape routes, along with what had to be the galaxy's largest collection of dog photos. Princess Droolenstein had claimed the best tactical chair and was leaving an impressive drool puddle on some important-looking documents. "The Council is preparing their final presentation to the United Nations," Pax informed us. "They will argue that dogs are holding back human technological and social advancement. They have charts." "Oh no, not charts," I gasped in mock horror. "However will we counter their PowerPoint presentations of doom?" "This is serious," Bulldog interjected, though I noticed he was absent-mindedly scratching behind Beethoven's ears while looking stern. "Once they make their case to the UN, they'll push for immediate implementation of their removal program." "Then we make our case first," Linda said, her eyes lighting up with that special gleam that usually meant she was about to science the hell out of something. "I've been collecting data on the positive impacts of human-canine bonds, everything from reduced stress levels to improved social development in children." "Data won't be enough," Pax warned. "You need to make them understand on an emotional level, which is admittedly challenging, given that my species considers emotional decision-making a sign of mental instability." That's when Professor Barks-a-Lot, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly perked up and barked at the TV. We'd left it running on mute, and there on the screen was Ambassador Zort, announcing an emergency UN session for the following day. "They're moving faster than expected," Pax's tentacles writhed in agitation. "They must suspect internal opposition." "Then we move faster," I said, an idea forming. "Linda, how quickly can you put together your research? Bulldog, can you mobilize our network? And Pax, how do you feel about committing some light treason?" The next 24 hours were chaos. Linda barely slept, compiling years of research into what she called the comprehensive guide to why dogs are actually the best thing ever, with charts, take that aliens. Bulldog activated every contact we had, and soon social media was flooded with #SaveOurDogs posts and videos of pets being adorable. And me? I found myself standing outside the UN building in New York, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. Apparently saving dogs doesn't leave much time for shopping, with a speech I'd written on the back of some dog treat receipts. The security guards took one look at my hastily printed credentials, then at Princess Droolenstein sitting regally beside me in her therapy dog vest, and waved us through with knowing smiles. Turned out we weren't the only ones with dogs in the building. The General Assembly Hall was packed. Ambassador Zort was at the podium, their tentacles doing that smug wave they did when they thought they were about to win an argument. And in conclusion, they were saying, the removal of dogs from Earth's ecosystem will result in a 47% increase in human productivity, a 32% reduction in resource consumption, and the elimination of what we scientifically term excessive emotional dependency. That's when I stood up, Princess Droolenstein at my side, and did something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Knowing me, probably both. "Point of order," I called out, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. "I'd like to present a rebuttal, if I may, and unlike the distinguished ambassador, I brought visual aids that don't require a PowerPoint presentation." Princess Droolenstein, right on cue, gave the assembly her best sad puppy look. I swear I heard several diplomats audibly awe. Ambassador Zort's tentacles went rigid. "This is irregular. The human has no diplomatic standing." "Actually," came a familiar voice as Captain Pax emerged from the gallery, "according to Statute 7(b) of the Intergalactic Diplomatic Code, any representative of an affected population has the right to present contrary evidence during a planetary intervention proposal." "I wasn't aware that shelter owners qualified as diplomatic representatives," Zort said stiffly. "I wasn't aware that bureaucrats had the right to declare an entire species parasitic without asking the hosts if we actually feel parasitized," I countered, stepping into the aisle. "But here we are." And that's how I found myself addressing the United Nations with a drooling pit bull mix as my backup, about to either save every dog on Earth or start an interplanetary incident. Possibly both. Standing before the United Nations with a pit bull as your primary diplomatic asset really makes you question your life choices. But Princess Drulenstein was working her magic, systematically melting the hearts of every human diplomat in the room while the Graxashi delegates squirmed in their seats. "Members of the Assembly," I began, "the Graxashi have shown you charts about efficiency, graphs about productivity, statistics about resource allocation. But they've missed something fundamental about humanity. We don't just keep dogs because they're useful, we keep them because they make us better." I nodded to Linda, who activated the holoprojector Pax had smuggled in. The air filled with images: guide dogs leading the blind, rescue dogs pulling survivors from rubble, therapy dogs comforting sick children, police dogs protecting communities, and ordinary pets simply being there for their humans in moments of joy and sorrow. "Dogs aren't parasites," I continued. "They're partners in the grand experiment called human civilization. Yes, we feed them. Yes, we clean up after them. And yes, sometimes they eat our favorite shoes and then look so guilty about it that we end up apologizing to them. Don't ask me how they managed that last one." A ripple of knowing laughter went through the human portion of the audience. Even some of the junior Graxi delegates' tentacles twitched in what Pax had told me was their equivalent of a suppressed smile. Ambassador Zort wasn't having it. "This is emotional manipulation. Look at how the canine is deliberately displaying infantile features to trigger nurturing responses." "You mean she's being cute?" "Yeah, that's kind of their superpower," I admitted. "But here's the thing about emotions, Ambassador. They're not a bug in the human operating system. They're a feature." That's when the doors burst open and Bulldog Thompson marched in, leading what can only be described as a canine honor guard. Military working dogs in full service gear, search and rescue dogs wearing their vests, therapy dogs with their credentials, all walking in perfect formation. Tesla padded along beside them, wearing what appeared to be a tiny lab coat Linda had made for him. "These are working dogs," Bulldog announced. "Dogs who have saved lives, protected people, and served alongside humans in every capacity imaginable, and those are just the ones with job titles." Ambassador Zort's tentacles were practically tied in knots. "This is unprecedented security." "Actually," Pax interjected smoothly, "according to Galactic Protocol 359b, demonstration of cultural practices is permitted during species intervention debates. I believe this qualifies." That's when we unveiled our secret weapon. On every screen in the assembly hall, we started playing the video, the one our social media team had spent the last 24 hours putting together from submissions around the world. Dogs reuniting with military personnel returning home, dogs protecting children, dogs howling along to music, dogs being, well, dogs. And then came the coup de grace, live feeds from every major city on Earth, where millions of people were gathering with their dogs. Parks, streets and squares were filled with humans and their canine companions, all waiting to see if their bonds would be forcibly severed by alien bureaucracy. "This is what you're asking humanity to give up," I said quietly, "not just pets, not just working animals. You're asking us to give up part of what makes us human." The assembly hall had gone silent except for the occasional happy bark from our canine delegation. I could see human diplomats wiping away tears, while the Graxashi delegates were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Zort rallied for one last attempt. We offer you advanced technology, medical breakthroughs, the stars themselves, and you would reject all of this for unconditional love, I suggested. For loyalty without spreadsheets? For the simple joy of playing fetch? Yeah, we would. Because here's the thing about humanity that your efficiency algorithms missed. We don't just value what's logical. We value what makes our lives richer, fuller, and yes, sometimes a little messier. Professor Barksalot, who had somehow slipped his leash and made his way to the main floor, chose that moment to sit down next to a junior Graxii delegate and offer his paw to shake. The delegate, looking around nervously, extended a tentacle. The handshake was awkward, but it happened. And that's when everything changed. The delegate's color shifted to a soft pink. What Pax had told me was their species' indicator of pleasure. "It's warm," they said in wonder. "And the emotional feedback. It's not overwhelming at all. It's nice." Other Graxi delegates were leaning forward now, their natural curiosity warring with their cultural prohibitions. Princess Drulenstein, sensing her moment, padded over to Ambassador Zort themselves. "Don't you dare," Zort warned her. "Don't you—" "Oh." Princess Drulenstein had simply sat down, leaned her head against the ambassador's leg, and looked up with those eyes that had convinced countless families that, yes, they definitely needed a pit bull in their lives. I held my breath. The entire assembly held their breath. Even the dogs seemed to sense the importance of the moment, falling silent. Ambassador Zort's tentacles twitched once, twice, and then very slowly they reached down to pat Princess Drulenstein on the head. It turns out that when an alien ambassador pets a dog for the first time in front of the United Nations General Assembly, it creates what diplomatic historians would later call the Drulenstein moment. Though personally I think they should have called it the day the aliens learned about belly rubs. The scene that followed would have looked absurd to anyone not present. Distinguished diplomats from around the world introducing their hidden therapy dogs to increasingly curious Graxi delegates. Tesla giving an impromptu demonstration of advanced training techniques to a group of alien scientists. Professor Barksalot teaching a junior diplomat how to play fetch with a spare bow tie someone had lying around. Ambassador Zort, still absent-mindedly petting Princess Drulenstein, cleared their throat. Perhaps our initial analysis was incomplete. "You think?" I couldn't help saying, though Linda elbowed me to be diplomatic. "Our species prides itself on thorough research," Zort continued, their tentacles waving in what I now recognized as embarrassment. "But we appear to have committed a significant oversight in our study of human-canine relations." "That's one way to put it," Bulldog muttered. "Therefore," Zort announced to the Assembly, "I propose an amendment to the Earth Enhancement Initiative. Instead of removal, we suggest a cultural exchange program." The next few weeks were interesting, to say the least. The Graxi established what they called the Interspecies Companionship Research Institute, though everyone just called it the Alien Dog Park. Linda was appointed as the chief human liaison, with Tesla taking his role as canine ambassador very seriously. Captain Pax became the first Graxi to officially adopt a dog, a three-legged corgi with a penchant for chasing their tentacles. They named it Efficiency, as a joke, though the name became less ironic when the dog turned out to be surprisingly good at organizing their filing system. The underground network we'd built didn't disappear, it just changed purpose. Instead of smuggling dogs past checkpoints, we were now running what amounted to an interplanetary cultural exchange program. Turns out there were lots of alien species who wanted to learn about Earth's four-legged emotional support systems. Bulldog Thompson started teaching a class called Advanced Human-Canine Relations for Non-Terrestrial Beings. His first lesson always began with throwing a tennis ball and watching the aliens try to figure out why the dog brought it back. As for second chance paws, well, we had to expand. It turns out that once you introduce an advanced spacefaring civilization to the concept of rescue dogs, you get a lot of interest from beings who never knew they needed a furry friend in their life. 1 year after the Drulenstein moment, I stood in the upgraded shelter facility, now with artificial gravity adjustments for our alien visitors, watching a Graxi child, or what I assumed was a child, It's hard to tell with tentacles. Learning how to gentle walk a golden retriever puppy. Did you ever think we'd end up here? Linda asked as Tesla supervised the interaction with his usual scientific thoroughness. You mean, did I think our dogs would end up being Earth's secret weapon for galactic diplomacy? I watched as Princess Droolenstein, now officially retired as a diplomatic ambassador, snoozed in her custom-made bed with the UN logo. Can't say that was in the business plan. Ambassador Zort, who had become a regular visitor and secret treat dispenser, drifted over. We have a saying in the Confederation, efficiency is the path to advancement, but perhaps we needed to learn Earth's corollary. Love is the path to understanding. That's beautiful, I said. Did you just make that up? Their tentacles did that embarrassed wave again. Perhaps. I've found that spending time with dogs makes one unexpectedly poetic. Professor Barksalot chose that moment to bring over his favorite toy, a plush alien doll that squeaked. The sight of a dignified ambassador playing tug-of-war with a scruffy terrier while trying to maintain their diplomatic composure is something I'll treasure forever. Later that evening, as I was closing up the shelter, I found a message from the Galactic Council. They were proposing a new initiative, establishing dog shelters across the galaxy. Apparently, several species had discovered that having a dog around made their bureaucracy run more smoothly, if somewhat less efficiently. I looked at the pile of paperwork on my desk, adoption forms in 17 different languages, some of which weren't even pronounceable by human tongues, and smiled. Beethoven, who had appointed himself my administrative assistant mostly by sleeping on important documents, thumped his tail against the floor. "Well, boy," I said, scratching his ears, "I guess humanity's best friends are now the galaxy's best friends too, though we might need a bigger treats budget." He woofed in agreement, and somewhere in the shelter, I heard an alien voice asking, "What is this good boy concept, and why does saying it make their tails move like that?" Some questions I've learned are universal, and some answers can only be found in a wagging tail, a happy bark, or the simple joy of throwing a ball and watching it come back to you, even if you have to use tentacles to throw it. As for me, I've got a shelter full of dogs, a galaxy full of potential adopters, and a sign on my door that now reads, "Second Chance Paws," where every species finds their perfect companion. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to help some dogs find homes. Though I still maintain that alien bureaucracy would run a lot smoother if they'd just install some belly rub stations in their offices.